developed by the Chinese Room and published by the Chinese Room and Curve Digital for the consoles, and is a non-game, which means that basically you don't do a lot. You explore, you discover the story, and you carry on going to discover what else is going on. It's very minimalistic. I have played it before, although that does not help you understand it anymore. So if you join me with the game, I'm going to play the whole thing in about an hour, and you can see it for yourself.
Esther, the gulls do not land here anymore. I've noticed that this year they seem to shun the place. Maybe it's the depletion of the fishing stock driving them away. Perhaps it's me. When he first landed here, Donnelly wrote that the herds were sickly and their shepherds the lowest of the miserable classes that populate these Hebridean islands. 300 years later, even they have departed.
So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go to the options and we're going to put the subtitles on, just for anybody that wants to read what's going along. The further you go along, the more information you find, and that's the sort of game this is. It's an interactive story, as it were. So I can walk around and I can zoom in, and those are the two things that I can do. As I say, it is a mystery game. The more story you discover, the bigger the mystery becomes. So we'll see what you make of it. I know what happens, but I don't know what happens, if that makes sense. So far, we'll just quickly recap what he's just said. He's just said about Hebridean Islands, which are islands off the coast of Scotland. As you can see in the background there is mainland. But we'll just start exploring. Oh, nice. Clearly abandoned. Luminous paint. I don't know what that means. The way it's set out looks like a sort of chemical equation. Oxygen, hydrogen, carbon. I am no good at chemistry, so I'm the wrong person to ask what that means. Ooh. Oh, all paint. Bit of a storeroom of it. Luminous premium paint. Okay, so that's an abandoned place. Two paths, beach or whatever's up there. I'm going to say we're going to go with this one because at least if we go up here, we can look down and see what there is. If you've got any theories, thoughts, ideas or comments, simply type them into the text bar and I'll be able to see them as we go. Red light in the background. Not sure what that is. I reckon I can make it over there. There we go.
Donnelly reported the legend of the hermit, a holy man who sought solitude in its most pure form. Allegedly, he rode here from the mainland in a boat without a bottom, so all the creatures of the sea could rise at night to converse with him. How disappointed he must have been with their chatter. Perhaps now, when all that haunts the ocean is the rubbish dumped from the tankers, he'd find more peace. They say he threw his arms wide in a valley on the south side and the cliff opened up to provide him shelter. They say he died of fever 116 years later. The shepherds left gifts for him at the mouth of the cave, but Donnelly records they never claimed to have seen him. I have visited the cave and I have left my gifts, but like them, I appear to be an unworthy subject of his solitude.
Must have been that cave that we just entered he's talking about. See, now we're down on the beach. graphics, I don't know if the graphics are as good on Mixer as they are as what I'm seeing, but it is stunning to look at. No, we've got options again. We can stay down the bottom.
There was once talk of a wind farm out here, away from the rage and the intolerance of the masses. The sea, they said, is too rough for the turbines to stand. They clearly never came here to experience the becalming for themselves. Personally, I would have supported it. Turbines would be a fitting contemporary refuge for a hermit. The revolution and the permanence.
I'd like to know who's doing the narrating. Oh, that's where we came across. There's that red light again.
The mount is clearly the focal point of this landscape. It almost appears so well placed as to be artificial. I find myself easily slipping into the delusional state of ascribing purpose, deliberate motive to everything here. Was this island formed during the moment of impact? When we were torn loose from our moorings and the seatbelts cut motorway lanes into our chests and shoulders, did it first break surface then? When someone had died or was dying, or was so ill they gave up what little hope they could sacrifice, they cut parallel lines into the cliff, exposing the white chalk beneath. You could see them from the mainland or the fishing boats, and know to send aid or impose a cordon of protection, and wait a generation until whatever pestilence stalked the cliff paths died along with its hosts. My lines are just for this. To keep any would-be rescuers at bay. The infection is not simply of the flesh.
This infection is not just of the flesh, obviously. Maybe he feels he's losing his mind.
I quote directly. A motley lot with little to recommend them. I have now spent 3 days in their company. That is, I fear, enough for any man not born amongst them. Despite their tedious inclination to quote scripture, they seem to me the most God-forsaken of all the inhabitants of the Outer Isles. Indeed, in this case, the very gravity of that term, forsaken by God, seems to find its very apex. It appears to me that Donnelly, too, found those who wander this shoreline to be adrift from any chance of redemption. Did he include himself in that, I wonder?
Okay, so Donnelly. Sounds like he experienced this island as well. I think this game is a really good example.
Dear Esther,
Oh.
I met Paul. Made my own little pilgrimage. My Damascus, a small semi-detached on the outskirts of Wolverhampton. We drank coffee in his kitchen and tried to connect to one another. Although he knew I hadn't come in search of an apology, reason or retribution, he still spiraled in panic, thrown high and lucid by his own dented bonnet. Responsibility had made him old. Like us, he'd already passed beyond any conceivable boundary of life. I find myself increasingly unable to find that point where the hermit ends and Paul and I begin. We are woven into a sodden blanket, stuffed into the bottom of a boat to stop the leak and hold back the ocean. My neck aches from staring up at the aerial. It mirrors the dull throb in my gut where I am sure I've begun to form a In my dreams, it forms into a perfect representation of Lot's wife, head over her shoulder, staring along the motorway at the approaching traffic in a vacuum of fatalistic calm.
I'm trying not to talk during those parts because obviously they're important. But I was going to say, I think this game is a perfect example of evidence when people say that games aren't a valid form of storytelling or entertainment, that you can get as much story out of a game than you can a film or a book if it's done right. And I think this really is an example of that. If there's anything you want to stop and you want for me to look at or anything like that, then feel free to ask me. I don't mind stopping for a few moments somewhere if there's something you want me to explore, or you feel like I haven't explored as much as you want me to.
The vegetation here has fossilized from the roots up. To think they once grazed animals here, the remnants of occupation being evidence to that. It is all sick to death. The water is too polluted for the fish. The sky is too thin for the birds. Oil is cut by those of hermits and shepherds. I've heard it said that human ashes make great fertilizer. That we could sow a forest from all that is left of your hips and ribcage, with enough left over to thicken the air and repopulate the bay.
After the hydrocarbon, we came up the little stream area here. I was just saying about how I feel like games are the sort of games like this anyway are evidence of how games are a very valid form of storytelling, and how you can get just as much out of a book of a game than you can a film or a book if it's done correctly. There's not much evidence of anything there. Makes me wonder who put them up. So he's talked about Paul and a man called Donnelly. I'm very much getting the feeling that Esther has died, and from what I can gather about Paul and his dented bonnet, she was killed in a car accident, or at least she was hit by a car, and the character that we are has reached out to Paul and visited him, trying to connect and find a way through the grief. Okay, so that is the first of 4 chapters completed. Got a nice little achievement there, 50G. You can't really complain about that. That's always nice.
I have now driven the stretch of the M5 between Exeter and Bristol over 21 times. But although I have all the reports and all the witnesses, and have cross-referenced them within a millimetre using my Ordnance Survey maps, I simply cannot find the location. You'd think there would be marks to serve as some evidence. It's somewhere between the turn-off for Sanford and the welcome brake services. But although I can always see it in my rear-view mirror, I have as yet been unable to pull ashore.
See, that's almost confusing, because that sounds like he's looking for the place where she was hit. But it also sounds like he was looking for a route to get to this island. So, again, ambiguous. I think that's where this game excels, is that the story could be maybe one of 5, 6 different things, depending on which piece of the evidence you want to put emphasis on. It's a nice little mess down there. But yeah, please share your theories as we go along, because you might find something in the evidence that...
It's only at night that this place makes any sluggish effort at life. You can see the buoy and the aerial. I've been taking to sleeping through the day in an attempt to resurrect myself. I can feel the last days drawing upon me. There's little point now in continuation. There must be something new to find here. Some nook or some cranny that offers a perspective worth clinging to. I've burnt my bridges. I've sunk my boats and watched them go to water.
Sanford is fictional. That's interesting. I did not know that. It's that bloody tower again. It would not be so prominent and raised up if it didn't have some sort of meaning. This is a right old mess. That's a defib, isn't it? Big one. Doesn't look like there's any way onto the boat. It's not right over there.
There must be a hole in the bottom of the boat. How else could new hermits have arrived?
Which one? That's the thing. So we came out up there, so we want to head up here. I think the only downside to this game is that you can't move any faster. But at the same time, it's kind of nice because then you can't rush through it.
I had kidney stones and you visited me in the hospital. After the operation, when I was still half submerged in anesthetic, your outline and your speech both blurred. Now my stones have grown into an island and made their escape, and you have been rendered opaque by the car of a drunk.
Okay, so Paul was drunk when he hit Esther.
What charnel house lies at the foot of this abyss? How many dead shepherds could fill this hole?
Well, that's... looks like there's water at the bottom. Could try jumping in. Can't imagine that would work too well. Might send us back to a respawn point, but let's find out.
Come back.
Well, that was strange. I got an achievement for it though. Oh, there's a house up there. Now I know there is an achievement for getting for drowning, so I will drown next time we come to the beach. Looks like gardens.
I've begun my ascent on the windless slope of the western side. The setting sun was an inflamed eye squeezing shut against the light shone in by the doctors. My neck is aching through constantly craning my head up to track the light of the aerial. I must look downwards, follow the path under the island to a new beginning.
It's quite the view.
The bothy was constructed originally in the early 1700s. By then, shepherding had formalized into a career. The first habitual shepherd was a man called Jakobsen, from a lineage of migratory Scandinavians. He was not considered a man of breeding by the mainlanders. He came here every summer whilst building the bothy, hoping eventually that becoming a man of property would secure him a wife and a lineage. Donnelly records that it did not work. He caught some disease from his malcontented goats and died 2 years after completing it. There was no one to carve white lines into the cliff for him either.
Okay, so Sanford is real. Yeah, that's a fair shout. Maybe he's just using this. Did you say that was hydrocarbon? There's another one there. But yeah, you said about his mind palace, so to speak. That he might simply be resting on that memory. It's maybe a bit of a starting point for life, leading up to the end of Esther and beyond. Before we go inside, we'll see what's about here. Boxes and board. Just another path by the looks of it. Little cove there. Let's go up and explore the house.
My heart is landfill. These false dawns waking into the still never light. I sweat for you in the small hours and wrap my blankets into a mass. I have always heard the waves break on these lost shores, always the gulls forgotten. I can lift this bottle to my ear, and all there ever is for me is this Hebridean music.
Okay, that is a scan. That is a baby scan, if I'm not mistaken. If the person that is narrating is not the person who we are, and it's not kind of a retrospect kind of thing, maybe that's his, and Esther was pregnant when she died. If he was on the island before the guy that we're playing as, or the person we're playing as. Just try not to fall off this cliff.
He left his body to the medical school and was duly opened out for a crowd of students 21 days after his passing. The report is included in my edition of his book. The syphilis had torn through his guts like a drunk driver, scrambling his organs like eggs on a plate. But enough definition remained for a cursory examination, and, as I suspected, they found clear evidence of kidney stones. He's likely to have spent the last years of his life in considerable pain. Perhaps this is the root of his laudanum habit. Although its use makes him an unreliable witness, I find myself increasingly drawn into his orbit.
Okay, I think he's referencing Donnelly there. The guy he said about being on the island before him. If Jacobson was in the 1700s, like, that he wouldn't have been a witness or reliable source. So he must be referencing Donnelly. Unless he's referencing Paul, the drunk driver that killed Esther. At least that's what I'm assuming. Yeah, an old ship. quickly check along this canyon before we go anywhere. What on earth is that noise? Suitcase with clothes in. That seems to be it. Okay, well, we're heading to the caves that were on the right hand side. Was a favourite drug of writers in the 16th century, and open surgery and natural theatre was common then. He did say about Donnelly writing, I believe, so it would make sense. There's a lit candle. Someone has to be here. Looks like there's... oh! Right, well that's chapter 2 of 4 done.
Donnelly did not pass through the caves. From here on in, his guidance, unreliable as it is gone from me. I understand now that it is between the two of us, and whatever correspondence can be drawn from the wet rocks.
Wow, look at that. Again, someone has to have been down there recently. There's another candle. That's stunning. If nothing else, the design and the animation of this game is something else. The detail as well. Right. Hopefully we can get back to the surface relatively soon.
It was as if someone had taken the car and shaken it like a cocktail. The glove compartment had been opened and emptied with the ashtrays in the boot. It made for a crumpled museum, a shattered exhibition.
So she was driving. That looks like an electrical circuit. What's that? With a candle. Oh, there we go. I wonder if there's any famous writers with the second name Donnelly. Because in whatever year this is set, that's quite gorgeous. Looks like the only way is down there. there's light. Oh, I suppose that might be the some stuff. Ah, another candle over there. Oh, we're back in this one. Hopefully we don't slip. Maybe where I came out and jumped. It's really close. I'd love to walk through these caves in real life. It could be stunning to see. And at this point of the game, let's give a shout out to the soundtrack of the game, which was composed by Jessica Curry, because it's a lovely soundtrack. It very much reminds me of Bear McCreary's Battlestar Galactica
traversing
soundtrack.
my own death throes. The infection in my leg is an oil rig that dredges black muck up from deep inside my bones. I swallow fistfuls of diazepam and paracetamol to stay conscious. The pain flows through me like an underground sea.
Sounds like he's in some real pain. Do the rocks by the candle have writing? No, it was just little symbols. It was nothing coherent that we could understand. Paper boats. There's another one. Where are you coming from? For anyone that's into Lord of the Rings, this is very much what I imagine the cavern to be like in The Hobbit when Bilbo comes across Gollum. Very much how I imagined it when I read it. Still doesn't tell me where that paper boat was coming from. I haven't seen any more coming along. Beach around the side. It's sandy area, not this one. What on earth was that? Ah, there's a path leading up. Hydrogen, oxygen, those symbols. Electrical current ones, that's a chemical symbol. Is there something that uses chemical and electric? I have no idea about that sort of science. When I say that, I mean, is there any sort of equation or system that uses chemical symbols and electric symbols. Isn't that called a neural? Or a synapses? No, synapses. Okay, between I can't remember. Science is not my thing. It's like teeth. It's like a hallway full of stars.
This cannot be the shaft they threw the goats into. It cannot be the landfill where the parts of your life that would not burn ended up. It cannot be the chimney that delivered you to the skies. It cannot be the place where you rained back down again to fertilize the soil and make small flowers in the rocks.
The whole Damascus is taken. Whoa, this is one big chemical electrical current. It's very trippy, to be fair. It's about the chimney that took her to the sky. Maybe she was cremated away from being a city. The whole Damascus is taken away from being a city. And it shall be... I can't read that. The whole Damascus is taken away from being a city, and it shall be no more. Did that say? Damascus shall be no more. I was going to say maybe the urn I found down there with the dust that flew off, maybe that was her ashes. Another hole. What the? Where are we? It's clearly an operating table covered in coins. Money everywhere. Maybe they, rather than Paul getting jailed, he simply paid them off or something. Is there anything else further up ahead? No. Looks like an eye. What is it seeing? Chapter 3 out of 4 done. Another candle and a tent. Is anyone here? That looks abandoned too. Let's start off by going around to the left.
I wish I could have known Donnelly in this place. We would have had so much to debate. Did he paint these stones or did I? Who left the pots in the hut by the jetty? Who formed the museum under the sea? Who fell silently to his death into the frozen waters? Who erected this godforsaken aerial in the first place? Did this whole island rise to the surface of my stomach, forcing the gulls to take flight?
He sounds like he's getting a bit irate, for want of a better word. If I drown, I'll get that achievement, so we can do that now.
Come back.
So it's up there by that light. Paint. More paint even. It's unlighted by the jetty. Oh, there's the light. Looks like we have to go around the outside of the cove, or the bay, or whatever you want to call it. There's lots of candles over there. Maybe there'll be a... What? That's a person. Oh. That is a person. That's definitely a person. We will go to find the person. Let's see if there's anything up by that candle.
Dear Esther, I find each step harder and heavier. I drag Donnelly's corpse on my back across these rocks, and all I hear are his whispers of guilt, his reminders, his burnt letters, his neatly folded clothes. He tells me I was not drunk at all.
Photos of the car accident. So he's now getting irate and angry about Donnelly. Is Donnelly Paul Donnelly? Could that be? That's dark. It's got to be the defib that couldn't resuscitate her. by this point, he must have been seriously losing it. Delirious. He's already said he's injured and he's taking painkillers and whatnot to stay awake. He must have got this far and just really began falling apart, like really deteriorated by now. Could he be Donnelly? You think he's had some sort of mental split from himself or disassociated? See, I got the impression that Donnelly had been here before him and he'd found a book written by Donnelly about the island that had led him to... Maybe he thinks he's Donnelly. Must be a picture of Esther. So what's with the chemical equations? Is he a doctor? Did he try to... Was he in love with Esther, or was he the doctor? Or the surgeon that tried to save her? Maybe he was both. There's another cave. I wonder what's in that one. Bits of the car, that's dark. Wheel, latch, door, exhaust. Has he been collecting parts? The only other theory I could come up with, maybe Paul Donnelly is him. Maybe he's the alcoholic and run her over, killed her. He's collected the pieces of the wreckage.
There were chemical stains on the tarmac, the leak of air conditioning, brake fluid and petrol. He kept sniffing at his fingers as he sat by the roadside, waiting as if he couldn't quite understand or recognize their smell. He said he'd been travelling back from a sales conference in Exeter. He'd stopped for farewell drinks earlier, but had kept a careful eye on his intake. You could hear the sirens above the idling traffic.
See, that makes it sound as if they are different people. It's that creepy music again.
From here, I can see my armada. I collected all the letters I'd ever meant to send to you, if I'd have ever made it to the mainland, but had instead collected at the bottom of my rucksack, and I spread them out along the lost beach. Then I took each and every one, and I folded them into boats. I folded you into the creases, and then, as the sun was setting, I set the fleet to sail. Shattered into 21 pieces, I consigned you to the Atlantic, and I sat here until I'd watched all of you sink.
Maybe it happened that there's no roads on the island from what we've seen. It's just a bit of almost like a leper colony from what I can gather. Sudden, a light from heaven shone around him, and he fell to the ground. X. Maybe he began drinking after it. There's got to be a path that leads up to there. The wall. I can tell you what it said. I can remember it says, all on a sudden, a light shone around him and he fell to his knees. A light shone on him and he fell to his knees.
When Paul keeled over dead on the road to Damascus, they resuscitated him by hitting him in the chest with stones gathered by the roadside. He was lifeless for 21 minutes, certainly long enough for the oxygen levels in his brain to have decreased and caused hallucinations and delusions of transcendence. I'm running out of painkillers, and the moon has become almost unbearably bright.
Well, if that Paul Saul reference there doesn't back that up, I don't know what will. I think that was a good shout there. Yeah, so was Paul. Nothing in there. Barbed fence, but I think that's just literally protecting. That person has to be nearby now. There they are. That is definitely a person. Yeah, it must do. Maybe he is imagining himself as some sort of biblical figure. Just go up and ask this person if they know what's going on.
I've begun my voyage in a paper boat without a bottom. I will fly to the moon in it. I've been folded along a crease in time, a weakness in the sheet of life. Now you've settled on the opposite side of the paper to me. I can see your traces in the ink that soaks through the fiber, the pulped vegetation. When we become waterlogged and the cage disintegrates, we will intermingle. When this paper aeroplane leaves the cliff edge and carves parallel vapor trails in the dark, we will come together.
What the hell? The guy was stood right here. We were down there when we spotted him. He was just here, just a minute ago. What the hell? There's no body, he couldn't have jumped. Did he run up here? And as he was proceeding on his journey. And as he was proceeding on his journey, and was come near to Damascus. She was proceeding on his journey and was come near to Damascus. And he
If only Donnelly had experienced this, he would have realized he was his own shoreline, as am I. Just as I am becoming this island, so he became his syphilis, retreating into the burning synapses, the stones, the infection.
3 days with... And neither did he eat nor drink. You think he saw the person as a come on, come kill yourself kind of thing? That's plausible. He said about hallucinating already, so that's definitely something that could be happening. We're getting ever so close to that light now.
Bent back like a nail, like a hangnail, like a drowning man clung onto the wheel, drunk and spiraled, washed onto the lost shore under a moon as fractured as a shattered wing. We cleave, we are flight and suspended, these wretched painkillers, this form inconstant. I will take flight, I will take flight.
Do you mean the verse that we've just read on the wall coming up to this part was a reference to Paul as well? It's empty in here as well. Another chemical equation. What does that one mean? I've seen that one 3 or 4 times. I really don't think that this guy made it. I'm slightly worried we're going to discover his body. Oh. And it came to pass. Backed off that cliff. Look at that. That's stunning. Heaven. Yeah, that's illegible.
He was not drunk, Esther. He was not drunk at all. He had not drunk with Donnelly or spat Jacobson back at the sea. He had not careered across the lost shores and terminal beaches of this nascent archipelago. He did not intend his bonnet to be crumpled like a spent tissue by the impact. His windscreen was not star-studded all over like a map of the heavens. His paintwork etched with circuit diagrams, strange fish to call the gulls away. The phosphorescence of the skid marks lighting the M5 all the way from Exeter to Damascus.
Sounds like his faith is really playing on his current mentality, state of mind. this is Damascus.
I have run out of places to climb. I will abandon this body and take to the air. Dear Esther, I have burnt my belongings, my books, this death certificate. Mine will be written all across this island. Who was Jakobsen? Who remembers him? Donnelly has written of him, but who was Donnelly? Who remembers him? I have painted, carved, hewn, scored into this space all that I could draw from him. There will be another to these shores to remember me. I will rise from the ocean like an island without bottom, come together like a stone, become an aerial, a beacon, that they will not forget you. We have always been drawn here. One day the gulls will return and nest in our bones and our history. I will look to my left and see Esther Donnelly flying beside me. I will look to my right and see Paul Jakobsen flying beside me. They will leave white lines carved into the air to reach the mainland, where help will be sent.
Esther Donnelly, Paul Jakobsen. They're completely different times. And then he dies. Becomes a bird. Dear Esther, this is the final entry in our letters. We don't know who you are. We don't know what happened to you. We don't know Donnelly. We don't know Paul. We don't know Jakobsen. But the island's still here. The story's still there. And despite it not making much sense to any of us, bit by bit, it came together. Okay, well, that was Dear Esther. As I said, it doesn't make a lot of sense, but I don't think it's meant to. So we looked at the evidence, we explored the island, and you can only really come away with your own conclusion. There was Bible references, there was chemical references, there was electrical references, there was all sorts of stuff. I don't know. I can't give you the answers to the game. I can't give you the answers to the story. But I can say, and I hope that you guys agree with me, that it is pretty bloody beautiful, in fairness. I got that game maybe 5-6 weeks ago, and this is probably the third time I've played it, and I think it's fantastic. There was a sequel, well, not a sequel, it was a spiritual sequel, one might say, by the same guys, called Everybody's Gone to the Rapture, which, now that I currently have my PS4 back, I am going to have a look at getting, because if it's anything like this, I can't wait to play it. But this will be uploaded to YouTube. You might even be watching it on YouTube now, and if you have a theory or you can make some sort of sense of the story, let me know what your thoughts are. Until then, that is me done, and I will be coming back with part 2 of the Kingdom Hearts broadcast as soon as possible. So thank you for watching, and see you soon.